Today, this tastes really good, Tom. Thank you. Cool.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yes. Very good.
You want a mint or something?
I'm pretty good right now.
You get that summer cold?
It stinks, man.
I'm just coming off of it. It went through our whole house.
Yeah, it went through our house too.
Yeah. It's fun times.
Shorter for the kids though. I don't understand why they can only have it for like 3 or 4 days, and then this is my second week. You know.
Seems like their immune systems are a little stronger than ours.
Yeah, maybe.
A little more resilient.
Gargle with salt water.
I did.
Swear by
Yeah.
it.
No, I know. That's one of my
Yeah,
favorites too.
Rubbing stuff.
And then the Vicks on your feet
Yeah.
is another one.
No, I've
You
never
know?
tried that one.
With socks at night. Yep.
Yeah?
Socks as long as
Okay.
you can tolerate them. You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I try to get the kids. You know, they put it on their chest, but I don't want to smell like that. I'm like, oh.
Do you have the sore throat too there?
Yeah, that was the
Yeah.
sign. You know.
All right, got 7 o'clock.
Okay.
So go ahead and call to order.
So we have everybody present?
Everybody's present. No guest or public.
We don't have any old business. We'll jump right into new business.
Yeah, I got a few things on the bills. Okay.
Sure.
I'll give you the page number, Tom, 68. If you want to zip on over. Just a question there on that school site license renewal annual, whatever, it's 5,700. If you wanted to talk a little bit about that. And if you don't know about it, then don't worry about it.
Which page did you say there?
I'm sorry,
57?
68.
68.
68.
Is that the page PDF 68 or is it this page number 68 in the bottom right corner?
Here we'll see. Yeah, there it is, 5774. Estate, or right there. Yeah. What is that?
Yeah, this is for the IMC. This is our annual software renewal, Learning Express. It's one of the tools that they utilize in the IMC for student resources.
Okay.
That's
It's just a licensing.
It's a
software
licensing
thing.
software renewal. It gives them access to a variety of different research sites that they can
Covers all
utilize.
4 schools?
All 4 schools. That's for the whole district.
That's
yeah.
what I want to know. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep. And then right there around page 77 now.
Which one is it, Lance?
77.
Yeah, but what? what are you looking at?
It was the furniture polish that caught my eye for 26.29. That's all. I just.
Oh, this right here.
Yeah.
Well, that
Is that the total of? No, up top, the 26.29. Is that from another?
well, that's for multiple things. This
Okay.
is the description. One of the items in this order was furniture polish. There was a conditioner, and the big piece is the toilet tissue. So there's 30 cases of toilet tissue and 30
Gotcha.
cases of paper towels that went into that total.
Sounds
So
good to me.
yeah, the floor furniture polish was one of the items. There was
Yeah, I saw the other stuff.
Yeah, there's 2 cases of that, and then 2 cases of the floor conditioner.
Okay. And that's distributed, I can't even talk, throughout all the schools too, right?
This one that you're looking at right here, this one is for Oak Forest.
Okay.
If you see this number here right under where the cursor is, that
Yeah.
04,
Okay.
4 would be for Oak Forest.
Gotcha. That's all I have.
Okay.
I just had a question on the decision ed payment. Just refresh my memory. Where are we at with that? Have we given them some money already? Were we giving them the money now?
Yeah,
Made a
that
decision on
we
paying on this.
last year we gave them the payment to do all the conversion of our existing data, and that was for the licensing. So the payment that we're
Okay.
doing this year is just for the licensing.
Okay.
And in terms of exactly where they're at, I'd have to check with Dr. Williams. I thought they had all the data converted over, and I thought we were in the training phase to start
Oh,
training
right,
our
yeah, I have
staffs
teaching
for
meeting with
that.
her tomorrow. I think we talked about that. I just meant
Okay.
payment-wise, where this is just like the annual payment we're giving them
This is
now.
the annual licensing
this-
payment
for
for
this-
this fiscal year,
Okay,
correct?
all right, that's what I wanted to know.
Yep.
And then if you could just tell me, I think it's Title I funds, Morrison Consulting. I'm sorry, let me find the page. I think it's 71. Is that somebody we always have? What did they do? I don't recall like
Let's see,
seeing them
that's
before.
probably,
Page 72,
There it is. No, down.
toward the bottom.
There it is.
oh, these are, this is for some of our contracted work that we have with them. Oh, wait, no, this is scan station bundle.
So what does that mean? What services are we getting?
No, that's a scan station bundle. That's another software piece. This is for
Oh, okay.
Hillcrest. They're utilizing this for attendance tracking. This is something that they found other districts utilizing, and they've implemented that for this year. It's a new system for attendance tracking in terms of overall attendance, but then for kids exactly where they're supposed to be. They have scanners, so you have a device that can say exactly where Kim is supposed to be class-wise and things of that nature, so they route the kids and make sure they're in the right classes. It assists with kids being in cafeterias, and sometimes, like on Fridays, if we have substitutes, kids will migrate down to the gym and they're not supposed to be in there. So they utilize this. It scans an ID and it'll immediately pop up and say, Mr. Canning's supposed to be in math class for fifth period. Why are you down here in the gym with the gym class? So that's something that they're piloting this year
Okay.
at Hillcrest. And we're paying for it out of our title funds.
Okay. Yeah, I saw that. I just was curious what it was for. Okay. And then only other one I have is there was a workman's comp to Silver Cross for. Do we have an issue with somebody? Is it an ongoing thing or a pin? You know?
Which page is that one? Because I'll have to take a look at it.
89.
Because we do have a couple work comp outstanding.
Couple of them going on, right?
Right. Let me get this thing sized.
Yeah, it's at the top of page 89. Yeah, the Silver Cross one.
Okay, yeah, this is to pay a bill for this staff member who had a work comp issue with her knee. That's what this is.
Is it just a one-time thing?
This covered her, she had ended up having knee surgery, so this
Oh.
particular bill covered the surgery.
Okay.
So we may see some additional expenses to that depending on how those get reviewed by our TPA, and then they get, once they're authorized and validated, then they submit those to us, and then we pay those out directly. We're self-insured on the work comp side, so you know the TPA manages all the claims and all the situations, and then once they authorize and okay those, then we pay directly to the vendors.
Okay. All right. That does it for me.
I got one other, unless Christine has some, I don't want
No, I've already addressed mine with Tom, so I'm good.
to. Okay. Tom, at any one time, are there lawsuits going on with the district right now? I mean, and the reason why I ask is because we just don't get the follow-up. I mean, Dr. Kendall will let us know something, but you know, the kid with the, remember the shot put smacked in the head? I remember you got something from an attorney that you had to turn over to the ad center here. Is that going on? And then there's some other ones that I faintly remember him talking about. Can we get a list of ongoing
Sure.
litigation or whatever?
Absolutely. And see, sometimes work comp is a tricky one because sometimes staff will engage attorneys, and then other times they're satisfied with the fact that the district hasn't taken away any of their time. They've been paid TTD while they've been out, and then all their bills have been paid. So it depends on the situation. But like that one that you mentioned with that student, that case isn't closed out yet, but there hasn't been formally a suit that's been filed that I'm aware of on that. Now, that doesn't mean there won't be.
Was that information you got? I'm sorry, Tom. Was that information you got, Kim? That was intent to sue, wasn't it? Do you remember that? And I hate to jog your memory, but
You know, I forwarded on to Bill, but
Yeah, I
I
remember.
honestly don't remember. I could go back and look. That was a long time ago.
yeah, it was, and I just had never
Yeah, it
heard
was a couple
anything
years
about
ago.
it. You know,
Yeah.
and I'm just wondering about that and some other ones, and maybe if we do have stuff that has gone to, you know, the lawyers or whatever, can we get just an update on it?
Yeah, I'll talk to Bill about that, and that's certainly something that is, you know,
Yeah.
something that can be put together and,
Awesome.
and provided to the board so that we keep you guys apprised of where things are at. And a lot of times, like I said, we're not even aware of it until we finally get the court document serving
Okay.
the district. And you may get some things like that, some cursory information things
Mhm.
sent out to board members or to staff members, just an information gathering thing to determine if in fact there is cause for a suit or not.
But
So-
is that the process though, that once we have information that someone's going through with a lawsuit, that will we get notified in closed session, or is that part of the process, or no?
Typically, we will share that with the attorneys, and they'll handle that, and then then they'll provide us feedback and recommendations on, well, this is something that there's no case here, or this is potentially a liability issue for the district, and here's a recommendation, those kinds of things. And when it gets to that level, then Dr. Kendall will share those with the board in closed session. But the preliminary stages, that may not always be information that's shared out, because we just don't know where the cases are going to be at the time. Right, exactly.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, but I mean, that's something that we can certainly.
I don't have anything anymore. I think when I forwarded it, maybe.
There was a couple others too, and I should have brought the information, but I didn't. I wanted to talk to you about this even last meeting, but
And sometimes in cases where we have a work comp situation and it drags out well beyond the leave time, and now you're getting into 2 years of this employee not being present at work. A lot of those, I shouldn't say a lot of them, but at times those are situations where they're just looking for a settlement. We may end up terminating them from employment in the district, and then it ends up we have to settle out with them after the fact. But at least it kind of forces the issue rather than dragging it out. I'd like to see those things happen quicker than they do, because what will end up happening is we'll pay TTD, which is temporary total disability, which means that they get a 2/3 pay situation without any deductions taken out for the length of the time that they're on that. And so people will drag that out, because in reality, if I'm getting a check which is almost equal to my take home with taxes taken out, if it's close, what's the incentive for me to come back to work?
No.
You know, so I'm just going to ride this thing out, and then eventually we say, okay, you've exhausted every form of leave that you have now. Now we're asking you, can you return to work? And then they'll say no. Well, then the district will bring it to the board, and we'll terminate some of those employees in those situations. And then that's when they say, okay, now I want to get a settlement out of this at the end result. So I would personally like to see us trying to take a hardline stance as much as possible in those situations. And there's most of them are legitimate, but there's some that are questionable that you just shake your head and you go.
And what's the timeline on their disability pay? Is it based on like their service time and?
Not so much their service time, but it all has to do with the leave time. And in the state of Illinois, the workman's compensation laws are very favorable towards the employee, not the employer. So it's very easy to drag things out and try to take advantage of the situation in certain circumstances. Again, I'm not saying that that's the case most of the time, but there are cases like that, unfortunately, where people will abuse the system and it ends up being costly for the district. Anything else in terms of bills? Any questions on the imprest or deposits? We didn't have any over 5,000s. CDS payables?
I was going to ask you how, give a little update on how that fleet card thing is working, because I've seen some of that stuff in. How is that system working?
When you say the fleet card, are you talking about the procurement card, the P cards that we utilize?
Yes.
Okay.
How's that system?
It's worked out well.
Has it?
Yeah, it has. It absolutely has.
Has it helped with tracking everything? And
it's helped with tracking things, and the biggest component of that, and we get a rebate check back, and we should be due soon here for our yearly one coming up. But the biggest thing is a lot of these parts for our chiefs and some of our supervisors, if they're ordering a particular thing online, like special ed, will utilize it as well. You need something quick, and it's available online, and you can get it right away. But a lot of these online places won't accept a purchase order, and the only method of securing the item or items you want to buy is through a credit card. So that's where it's been the biggest advantage is.
But aren't we also using it for gas, and the kids go on a trip with their coaches, they can fill up and...
Yes, that's correct. So yeah, it takes, in that regard, that's another big advantage. So now we're not giving a coach, if a coach is taking 10 kids downstate, right, and you're going for 3 days and you have X amount of cash per kid plus the coaching stuff, now you're paying for rooms, you're talking about thousands of dollars of cash, right, that used to be the responsibility of the coach, right, and that's no longer the case now, because they can utilize that P card, and now there's a tracking of all the receipts, and so from that, it's worked out great in that regard. Yeah, I wasn't even thinking about that aspect of it, but yes, yeah, it's been very successable overall.
Good,
it really has.
Good. What kind of rebates are we getting back? Because we got to be spending some good money on there.
Yeah, and we're expanding it now. Like we'll pay a lot of our utility bills. Some of the things that we're starting to bump into now is vendors are charging a convenience fee if it's over a certain limit. Okay. And so we're not going to utilize the card when it's going to cost us money and offset that, but rebate-wise, like I said, we should find out, and it's a percentage of your usage for the year. It's
what
a one-time.
Last year?
Yeah, last year was small because we were in the infancies of utilizing it. We only had like 6 months. So, but even with that, I want to say we got a rebate in, and don't quote me on this because I'd have to go back and double check, but in the $20,000 range. So we anticipate that to be a lot more.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I mean, it's free money.
It's free
money. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Good to hear. You know, I just speak for myself. I like to hear the updates.
Yeah,
like
sure.
that on that kind of stuff. You know,
absolutely.
Where are we at?
Yeah, and when I get this one, I certainly will make sure that we put that out there.
Great. Thank you. Seems like it went over well with the staff too, right? And
Yeah,
the ADs,
absolutely.
it must
No,
be helping the
it's
ADs.
right. The ADs love it. The coaches love it because again, that burden of having all that money, especially for the coaches, is not. It's not there anymore. And you know, and I used to take the track team downstate. It's hard. You're managing all that money for all those kids, and then you're trying to track all these receipts. It's just so much easier
Good.
with the P card.
I'm glad that's going good.
So, CDS legal budget. Not a whole lot to it. It's pretty standard. It's their expenditures are 1.4 million. I think they were 1.3 last year. They're very similar. And again, the whole premise of the CDS, the Career Development System, is they are the liaison that handles all the career and technical education dollars. The federal, and they're all federal dollars. The federal government has it set up that there has to be a liaison, that an intermediary between the districts and between the federal dollars. So the CDS is the program that runs all of the dollars, the expenditures, the in and outs for 3 districts: our District 205 and District 215. So this is their budget. They have to present the same budget as we do on a budget format.
How many staff do they have working there?
They have.
And what is their salaries total?
Yeah, well, let's take a look.
Yeah, I was trying to find all that stuff.
So here are the salaries on this budget: $103,000, and benefits are 27.
Must be only a couple people.
Yeah, there's 2 that I'm aware of. Now they had a third, and I don't know if they ever filled that. The third one was a part-time one. I don't think they ever filled that back.
Okay, that's
So, yeah.
fiscally responsible.
Right. There's a director, and then there's an assistant for the director.
Yeah. Good.
So we okay with this budget and recommending this to the
I've reviewed it and it's very good.
full board?
Yes.
All right, moving right along. Just I put a note in here, just in the memo, but in terms of this, because we've been very fiscally responsible, we're looking at finishing out this fiscal year, being 2017, with around $30 million in our working cash fund. And that's significant because if you go back to the projections from several years ago, we anticipated being well below that mark. So the fact that we're there is a very positive thing. And I'll share some of that as we get into the budget presentation. Let me go through that first, and then if we have any questions on the budget document itself, we can come back to that. Does it help when I pull this down?
Oh yeah, that glare is gone.
Yeah. That's why we put it up there. Make sure I get the right one here. Okay, so first we have our revenue comparisons versus prior years. And as is per normal, we're looking at our real estate taxes being the largest component of our FY17 budget. You can see we're about $600,000 up from the prior year based on the levy that we filed. In terms of other things, we're slightly down in terms of other local revenue. And one of the contributors to that is this year we're noticing more students qualifying for fee waivers. So registration fees and the technology fees, we're not anticipating those for all of our students. Less percentage of students are actually paying some of those fees. In terms of general state aid, this is a very big positive. We're not going to see a proration this year. Now, I say that with a caveat. Hopefully we get all of our general state aid payments. They have in the past said, you know what, we don't have the money, so they've not paid districts that last month's payment when it comes down to June. But hopefully, everything holds solid, and the projection is that it will. But again, we're talking about the state of Illinois here, so I just say that as a cautionary measure. We're almost exactly in terms of other grants, and federal grants were down a little bit, and then in total revenues were up $700,000 going in. This is how it looks as we chart it out. Again, our obviously that's the wrong. I've got the wrong chart on there. I apologize. I'll have to adjust that. This is not the revenues. This is the expenditures. Let's see. And I did the same thing, so I copied in the wrong chart. Let's fix that real quick. So here's the actual chart. I'll plug that in for the board meeting. But 65% of our revenues is generated from our taxes. Our general state aid makes up 26% of our revenues, and then the other smaller groups, state aid, other grants, and federal grants, make up each about 3%. And that's pretty typical of what we see each year. There's not any real significant change here other than this general state aid has increased by several percentage points over the prior year. And again, that's because we're not anticipating that proration of the general state aid.
How come you feel confident that we're going to get that money if we don't even have a budget passed in Illinois? What have you been hearing?
Good question. I think the pressures are so great in Springfield from the educational front right now that they're going to have to look at addressing some of the shortcomings in other areas, but I think education is going to be left alone. I really do, because we've taken the hits with the prorations the last 5 years now, and prior to that they cut out mandated categorical grants. They've taken out some of our district dollars for the corporate personal property replacement tax. So we're going to lose some money there, and I'll talk about that in a couple minutes. But I'm pretty confident that overall the districts are going to see the funds that they're told that they're going to be given. If they weren't going to make them available, they would have prorated us again like they did in the past to reduce those numbers down. But
what would be the hit on that, Tom, if in fact our worst nightmare materialized as far as for the state aid? What kind of a hit would we take on the proration?
Well, I don't. It's not going to be a proration, but like I mentioned, what they may do is forego the last payment or the last two payments in general state aid. So you're looking at 800,000 to $1.6 million, depending if it's one or two payments. Again, I don't foresee that happening. I really don't, unless things just get dire with the state. But
now, should we base our budget on that happening? And if it doesn't, then everybody...
No, there's no one that's doing that I'm aware of. And none of the other districts are working off of that premise. Again, in prior years, you were a little more cautionary, but everybody feels pretty comfortable with the numbers that they provided us in terms of general state aid that we're entitled to. Everybody feels pretty comfortable that we're going to receive those. Like I said, other areas, some of the mandated categoricals, they've played with those a little bit, but even though we've been able to sustain those hits over the course of the years. So I feel comfortable with these numbers. In terms of our expenditures, obviously salaries is our largest expenditure, and you can see here we are increasing, but that's to be anticipated because of the contracts, the union contracts that we have that have the raises in them. But you'll notice we're not increasing significantly, and that's looking at some of the positions we've sectioned tightly. We've eliminated a couple positions, so we're not seeing large increases here salary-wise. We've had some savings generated with the 9 retirees that we had this past June, and we're anticipating and projecting that number to be lower for next year because we've got a large graduating class retiring in 2017. I think we're upwards of 20 staff retiring in 2017. So we're looking at an additional savings generated there. In terms of employee benefits, we did have an increase there. We saw that and we talked about that on the PPO side. Purchase services were up a little bit, and that's some of that attributes to some of the new technologies and softwares that we're utilizing. We went down in our supplies and our materials slightly, and our capital outlay, you notice we're jumping significantly there, and that is because we've added that year one capital plan into this budget. So we added $10.8 million into that, so that's increasing that from where it typically is in around that $2 million, $2.5 million range.
Wait, so let's talk about
sure,
that a little
absolutely.
bit.
And I'll come back to that, but yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No,
go back to it.
I'll show you on the budget document what we're referring to there. In terms of out of district tuitions and other, that's mainly comprised of special ed tuitions. There's a few other homeless things and of that nature that are rolled into that number, along with some transportation for those. Our debt service is decreasing by about $120,000 for this year, and so overall our expenditures are $102 million. That's up 10.86%, but again, you back out that $10.8 million, and we're right significant to where we were in years past, with a very small movement in terms of our overall expenditures.
So you said that 10.1 million was due to the year
10.8 is year one, what we put in there for that, yes.
So on the deposit side, we wouldn't factor that in until
the bond issue. And I'll show you that, how it looks on the budget form and how that is documented and outlined in just a couple minutes.
Okay.
And I think that ties in with Larry's piece. So here's how that breaks down in terms of dollars, and what it looks like in a graph. Again, salaries and benefits comprise the largest component of our budget, along with that capital outlay that we have in here this year. This is an interesting slide, and this just shows the fiscal responsibility that we continue to work on, and by no means are we done working on that, but it shows the evidence of reducing that operating deficit of the education fund, the operations and maintenance fund, and the transportation fund. So we're the lowest that we've been in 5 years in terms of what we project for a deficit. So we're about $1.5 million reduced in that operating fund over last year. And to me, that's a significant piece. And we're going to keep working to move that barometer down. In terms of our actual deficit for FY16, the auditors are finalizing numbers now, but preliminarily, we're looking at about a $2.2 million deficit for FY16 overall. So we projected over 5, but actuals coming in around 2.2. So that's significant. That's the lowest, second lowest deficit we've had in the last 8 years
So
as a district.
what would you say from 2013 until what you're projecting here in 17? Okay, what would you say is the biggest thing that has happened in a district to come down like that?
Well, let's go back and look. It was a combination of things that have taken place, but holding the line on our spending, you look at other districts' budgets and you'll see a lot of these categories going up 3 and 4% annually, and we're nowhere near that. The biggest factor in that is the contracts that we've negotiated, because we're not seeing large, rapid increases in our salaries. And you'll see, if you look at this similar graph for another district, that you're not going to see.
So you're saying taking those steps out?
See that. I'm saying a combination of the things that we've negotiated, not only salary, but other components of the contract that impact salary, such as a new salary schedule for new hires. Those things have significant impact over time. Those have been one of the biggest things that I can look at and attest to, aside from just being as fiscally responsible as we can as a district overall. And we've done some other things, special ed wise, where we're bringing our students back. We're now servicing them in the district. We feel we're providing a better service for them. They certainly want to be in their home school, and we're not paying those out-of-district tuitions. We've seen significant adjustments and some savings as a result of some of those programs that we've implemented in the district as well.
When I've taken the time to look at some of the past budgets and the past expenditures, and it's not one bucket that we can sit here and point and say this is the one thing that caused us to reduce our.
It's a combination of all those things.
A lot of decisions that have been made by previous boards and the current board that has brought us down to this position. So unfortunately, it's just not one particular action that you can.
No, you're right. I can't specifically pinpoint we did this and it triggered that. But again, it's the combined efforts of all the things, and the contract negotiations the last couple of years have been significant components of that.
And I think that also kind of goes to a lot of the decisions that we're making today. We were wanting immediate results right away, but it doesn't happen. I think this is a prime example of how you see decisions that were made in 2013 and 2014 we're now beginning to see the benefits of those decisions.
Yes, administrative contracts for 10-month administrators. We completely 10-month administrators used to be on the teacher's contract, so they were afforded the same opportunities as teachers were and towards advancement, lane changes, and salary advancements, and we completely eliminated that, and that. We projected that, and I have to go back and look at the exact year, but we're closing in on that 5 years, but we projected a savings of over $2 million by doing that. And so that's another factor that is impacting this bottom line. We don't have those raises ballooning out like they would had that decision not been made and we didn't move those 10-month administrators off the teacher's contract. Just some things that are still potential threats, and nothing on the horizon immediately with the exception of the bottom bullet. But this property tax freeze, they've been talking about that for several years. It's still being floated out there. It hasn't really gained any significant traction. But it is something that still could happen. I don't see it impacting us this fiscal year, but it's still out there. Pension shift, moving that TRS back locally. Again, that's another component that has been kicked around in Springfield. And they've talked about phasing that in, you know, 1% a year kind of a thing, and that would have an impact of about $500,000 annually to the district if that were something that were to happen. Again, I don't see that happening immediately, and I don't see it hitting us in this fiscal year. Mandated categoricals, that's something they've done in the past, and that's been solid for the last 2 years. But it is still something, it's kind of like going to the well. If they absolutely have to go to the well, they may say, you know what, we're going to forego the 4th mandated categorical payment and you're only going to get 3 instead of 4 type of a scenario. The state has done that before. And the last piece there is the corporate personal property replacement tax. They had a change in the rate. It used for businesses, it used to be 15%. That they could file. Now it's gone up to 17%, so the pot has shrunk. So now that's less dollars coming back to school districts, and that did impact us for this fiscal year by the tune of $80,000. If they were to eliminate that altogether, it would be about $677,000. That we don't know. The other thing that I don't have up here, but it's not really a threat. It could be a threat for some districts, but not for us, is there's been talk for 10 years about changing the funding formula for school districts. I think they're closing in on coming to grips on a solution. The ones that we've seen floated out there are going to have a benefit to our district. So depending on which one they finalize, and it might be a blend of a couple different things that are out there, but either way, that would have a positive impact for us. You know, we're looking at anywhere between $1.5 to $3 million additional revenues per year. So I'd love to see that happen, because there goes our deficit, and now we're running a positive budget, no longer a deficit. But again, we're going to have to wait and see what happens in Springfield with that. This one I thought is a significant slide, and without some explaining, it doesn't look much different. But in terms of our education fund, although it's not a big number, we're still doubling what we anticipate to have as a balance at the end of this fiscal year. So that's double where we've been over the last 4 years when you compare that out. Now the operations and maintenance fund, we anticipate just under $10 million in this fund at the end of the year. We were looking at 4 years ago a little over around $2.5 million, and that we've grown that fund to almost $10 million. Transportation, likewise, we're almost doubling what we anticipate in the transportation fund. And then when you get to working cash, and this is kind of our safety net that we've utilized to offset the district deficits. If you looked at the projections from a few years ago, this was supposed to be a declining slide significantly to a point where we'd be talking about
17
having to
or
do.
something like that.
We would have been down significantly more than where we were now, and I'll have to put together another slide to actually show, what the trend was versus what it actually is. But we've dropped by about $4 million. That's the smallest that we've borrowed from this fund in the last 5 years. We're going to transfer $4.5 million from this working cash fund this year. But in the end, we're projecting to be over $30 million still in this fund. So that's significant. And one of the reasons we have a nice healthy balance in our operations and maintenance fund is when we file our levy, because of some of the things that have happened with the properties and the valuations have gone down over the last 5 years. So that what that does is it inflates the rates because there's an inverse relationship there. And there's rate caps on our operating funds. And our education fund is getting close to the $3.50 rate cap that was on there. So to offset going over that, what we do is we levy more dollars in some of these other funds. So if we had the ability in the education fund, we would levy more there. But because we don't, because we're close to that cap, we've been levying in transportation and operations and maintenance. And so we've grown those funds. But now, if we need to, next year we'll have the ability to transfer some of these dollars from the O&M if this projection holds true and we have $10 million, and now we have a $2 million deficit for next year, and I'm just speculating, we can transfer out of here into O&M to offset that deficit, and then we can leave this fund balance right where it is. Mm-hmm. So again, this is a very positive situation that we're in as far as our fund balances and the direction that we're heading in overall.
So just a question, and maybe it's not a genius question because I'm not a mathematician, but if our deficit is running in the education fund and we have all this working cash fund, why can't we allocate more funds to that education fund so that we don't run a deficit on that?
Well, you can, but let me jump in here because this will help. Okay, so if you look at the education fund in our budget summary, we can, and what we did was that $4.5 million, a component of this 6.9 beginning balance is comprised by that $4.5 million. We put $3.5 million into this education fund out of the $4.5 million that we're transferring from working cash. The other $1 million went into the IMRF fund because we ended the year with a negative balance in this fund. So we put $1 million in there to give us this $657,000 because we were about $500,000 in the negative at the end of the fiscal year for 16.
How do we run short on that? Do numbers change?
Yeah, well, it's numbers can change during the year, and levy dollars that we levy for, because we're in a tax cap situation in Cook County, we're always levying for more, asking for more than what we're entitled to. So when they do the reauthorization on the levy, they're pulling pieces out from what we originally levied for. So that's what's happening in the IMRF fund. Now, this year with the levy, I'm going to change the it's called the parameters resolution. And basically what that does is says to the Cook County clerk, if we're over on our levy and the funds have to be reduced, it directs them, the board directs them, which funds are going to be reduced. So what we typically do is say, reduce each of the funds equally to get to the dollar amount that it needs to be reduced by, but leave the ed fund alone. so that we capture as many dollars in the ed fund as we can, because we know we're running deficit in the ed fund. But what's happened now is, as a result of that, when we're not getting those revenues that we levy for initially in that IMRF fund, and it's generating a negative balance at the end of the year. So my parameters resolution this year to the county is going to say reduce the other funds but leave ed and leave IMRF alone. Leave those to what we levied for those. So then that will not generate then a negative balance like it did this year. That makes sense?
Yes.
So then you look back to your question, about the deficit. We put in monies, but it comes in the beginning. The actual deficit is generated by what takes place during the year outside of the beginning fund balance. So it takes, all right, here's everything we anticipate revenue-wise in the ed fund. And the totals here are 67.5 million. That does not take into account this beginning balance. Then we look at our expenditures and we say, okay, we're looking to budget $73.2 million in expenditures. So then the formulary just takes this line versus this line, and it gives you what you see here, excess or deficit. And in this case, we're looking at a $5.7 million deficit. But then when you net that out with our other operating funds, we're looking at a surplus of 1.8 in O&M and a couple $100,000 in transportation. So that's where you see that drop down and reduced to in that $3 million range that we were looking at on the previous slide.
And now what if we didn't have this 10.8 million in the capital funds in the negative here? What does that do?
And notice that's in the capital projects column. And we don't have anything, we haven't levied anything, or excuse me, we haven't budgeted anything in this fund previously. The smaller things we've put in operations and maintenance. But because we're bonding this and it's a multi-year situation, we put this in the capital projects. This is year one at 10.8. And there's no offset to that. So it's showing up as a deficit here. But where we pick that up is down here. Mm-hmm. So the principal on our bonds sold is $50 million. So this fiscal year, the board is going to approve the bond issue. And once we do that, then you see what happens in the end when we get to the next page of this summary. This line 81, this provides us with the estimated ending fund balances. So when you take this 5.7 million and you net it against this 6.9 in the education fund, that's going to leave you with a 1.2 balance. And then the same thing happens with the other funds. And notice what happened to the capital projects fund. It takes that $50 million that we're going to be bonding, we're going to get those dollars for that, and we're going to utilize 10.8 million of those for that year one, and that's going to leave us with this 39.2 million in our capital projects as a fund balance. Typically what we've done in years past in previous bond issues is we've put that in working cash. We've done working cash bonds, but we're going to be doing capital bonds this year. Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I got a question on working cash. And if you could go back to that one slide where it shows 30 million in our working cash fund.
Oh, sure. The bar graph?
Yeah. Okay. Can you explain to us, Tom, the $30 million, at what point, if it falls under a certain percentage, are we basically in trouble with the state in terms of having to do a deficit reduction plan?
Yeah, sure.
Could you explain?
Yeah, absolutely. And let's look at this because this will probably explain it a little better than I can.
So it isn't like you can just use that whole fund
Well,
when you
that's
run
kind
a
of my
deficit.
question, when that's there and we're running a
That's
deficit,
what
why are we
triggered-
leaving
All right.
so much money in
Yeah,
there?
because you have to, or we'll be skunked with
But
the
we
state.
have to. Yeah.
Well, if it starts running down, again, we
That's
have
what
it.
happened to Lincoln Way.
Yes.
Okay.
If it starts running down,
Because of deficit.
because your
you're pulling
deficits are out of control,
it. Right.
then you're going to have to do a deficit reduction plan. And Christine had asked me that question previously with her questions is, in terms of that, what triggers that? And the answer is right here. Okay, so a deficit reduction plan is required if the local Board of Education adopts the budget in which the operating funds above result in direct revenues being less than direct expenditures by an amount equal to or greater than 1/3 of the ending fund balance. Okay, so we're looking at a deficit here of $3.5 million. All right, we've got over 30 million. So if our deficit was over $10 million, because a third of 30 would be 10 million, if it was over $10 million, that would trigger that deficit reduction plan. And we would be required by the state to do a 3-year deficit reduction plan. And my first year when I started here, and I inherited a 11 whatever million dollar deficit was, I was required to do a deficit reduction plan. And so, again, that's another piece of what, reducing that deficit down. Some of the components of that plan, are still have a long-term impact on how things are done. But this is, again, even though we're running a deficit, I view this still as a very positive overall situation from where we were versus prior years. We're continuing to move in the right direction. We're not perfect, we're not there yet, but we're continuing to move in the right direction.
So the 5.7 million that shows a deficit is offset because we got more in our
O&M, right?
Yes, and
exactly.
Transportation.
So
You're
right,
taking
and
that.
you take those
So
dollar
what if
amounts.
you use that?
Pardon me?
What if you use that? What if transportation, the state cuts transportation, and we have to use that excess? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, if that were to come
So then
to
your deficit
reality,
goes
then our
up.
deficit's going to go up.
Right.
But like I mentioned earlier, from previous budgets, we're projecting a deficit and we're coming in, our actuals are coming in under that. And when we get our AFR from the auditors, we'll go over that and I'll review that with you. I'm tentatively projecting an actual deficit of around $2.2 million. So if you go back to this sheet from last year and look at it, we were projecting, well, let's look, what did we say? We were projecting 4.9 last year, and we came in at 2.2. So we're significantly
so what I'm
under.
asking, being a homeowner, every month something happens. Whether it's the
Sure.
hot water heater,
Sure.
whether it's the furnace, whether it's the air conditioner. If we get tagged with a bunch of unexpected situations, okay, for instance, Hillcrest, that was quite costly to the district, over $500,000 to replace their heating and air, right?
Yeah, but that wasn't an unexpected thing. That was something that we budgeted for.
But if it's unexpected, say Oak Forest, they go to flick on the heat and it just doesn't come on. That's a possibility. So
Sure.
we have to have those funds in there ready to go.
Well, and I have a $100,000 in our district building account.
Yeah.
Each building gets $75,000 to address some of these issues.
Mhm.
And I also have $100,000 in the district building account. So if by chance, we have a major pipe situation
Pool,
over the winter or
you
pool
name
leak,
it, yeah.
and the building budgets can't absorb it, we've got a $100,000 cushion and backup here in the district office that we can offset
But even
that
like
with.
worst case scenario, if we had a plan, let's say you do roofing and something like this happens, at some point in time we would probably have to reprioritize and say, when we plan to do this in 2016, we have to potentially move it out because we had this unexpected.
Right, and we have insurance as well. So, most of these catastrophic type situations, insurance is going to cover those. So, You know, that's the other piece of it.
So how
You know,
much
we had a
is-
windstorm that knocked off the electronic signboard on the scoreboard at Tinley, and it took some of the metal roofing off and the concession stand at Hillcrest. Well, we had insurance that replaced the cost of the new.
Do we have insurance if something just breaks down and we have to replace it and it costs
No,
$500,000?
no, well-
I don't know of any insurance like that.
No, I can't think of something that's going to cost $500,000 if it breaks
Well, I
down.
just put an example. I mean,
Give me an example.
the
of-
heating and air at Hillcrest. Now, we had planned to do that,
Right.
but what did I say? If we go to flick on the switch at one of the other schools for the heat, and none of the heat goes on because our systems are kaput.
But we're
because-
not going to lose a whole system.
Because
we may
they're not
lose.
talking to the new computer system that we have, and now we're forced to change out. You know what I mean? So
I understand what you're saying, but
I don't want to sound too far fetched, but because I am a homeowner, I understand that
Sure.
things happen all the time.
Absolutely. And in my 13 years that I've been in this building addressing these types of things, we've never had a major catastrophic situation where we haven't been able to address it through building funds or offset it with insurance. Or fix it. You know, I mean, if the heating system goes out at Oak Forest, we're going to fix it. We're not going to replace the whole system. And so it's not going to cost us the $500,000. Now, if we have to continuously throw money at it to get it fixed, then that's where we're going to say, okay, now it's time to move on to a new system. And that we will plan for accordingly through capital. And that was one of the things that we did with Hillcrest. We knew that we needed to update that system. It was no longer functioning properly, and we were spending money on repairing it. And so we budgeted into
I'm
our
just trying
capital
to shed
process.
some light on that.
Sure. No,
great that
I like your logic.
If our deficit's coming down, but we're one repair away from that deficit going right back up, because then you have to dig into that fund, correct?
Sure. There's always that possibility.
Okay. As
Absolutely.
long as we're aware of that.
Yeah.
And I'm
Well,
not saying
how
that
much
you're not.
room is in that fund before we're required to do a deficit reduction plan? We're at how much the
The
percentage
working
right
cash
now?
fund?
Working cash fund. What's
Yeah,
our
we,
percentage at now?
we've got about $25 million in there before we have to do a deficit reduction plan, as it sits right now.
So, and if the deficit stays at, let's just take a round number, 3 million,
Mm-hmm.
okay? So it'd be 3 million, 3 million, 3 million until you
Yeah.
wrote that 25.
Well, in theory, that would last us another 10 years
Yeah.
if that was, to be the case.
So what can we do beside having money not levied out of that fund to increase that education fund so that we can get the deficit down out of that? Does my question make sense? Is there something we can do to get more money in that education fund so that we're not running a deficit on the education fund? Besides just moving it from
Working cash.
Wasn't that the money we're going to get from the bond?
Well, the bond money is specific to certain
No, I'm
projects.
talking about the tax, the reimbursements that we're going to get from the bond.
Yeah, where does that play
Well, we
a
still have to
factor?
pay that. That's still going to be in debt service.
But that's still, when that money does come in. that's when-
Yes, I mean, to answer your question, it's a difficult one because in terms of what you're looking at doing is one of two things. Reducing these expenditures down here to bring this number down, or increasing these revenues up here. Well, we're not going to increase our local revenue source. If the funding changes, the formulary changes for the state, then that could change the state source. And like I mentioned, that could be anywhere from $1.5 million to $3 million. If that happens, that's going to have significant impact on us overall. Like I mentioned, this year coming up, 2017, we're going to be retiring a larger group of teachers. That's going to have an impact on the salary numbers here that you see in instructional services and support staff. That's going to bring those down. So that's going to have a positive impact on that red number that we see up there as well. But putting more money in the beginning isn't changing anything that's happening with this number right here.
Right.
That only changes what we see in terms of that ending balance
Okay.
for the fund. But again, overall, I think this is a sound budget. I think we're continuing to move in the right direction from a fiscal standpoint. And, because of that, we have positioned ourselves to be in a good situation. I mean, there's a lot of districts that would, again, step back from the fact that we're operating at a deficit budget, because there's over, and I'm not saying that this qualifies it, but there's over 60% of the districts in the state that are operating a deficit budget. But there's very few of them that are in a financially strong, sound position that we are in. And we're continuing to work down from that. And if you remember when Dr. Kendall was talking, one of our previous meetings or presentations, had we not been dealing with a lot of the fiscal challenges that the state has put on us, we would be very close to a balanced budget each and every year. But because we've been dealing with those things, we've been able to absorb those challenges, still be strong, and still have a pretty sound fund balance overall when you look at it as a district.
Right.
So just one more question.
Sure,
so
absolutely.
When the payments, the bond payments, the interest payments start coming in, we haven't allocated anything in this budget for those payments to be used?
Yes, we have.
Okay, where's that?
Well, that's going to change. It's coming out of debt service, okay? That you see this 9.2 here budgeted, but those won't start kicking in till the next year. In our October meeting, I'm going to bring Rob Grossi back in, and we're going to cover the bond issue thoroughly so that everybody understands the structure and the payments and the subsidies and the interest and all of that. So we'll do that at next month's meeting, and I think that'll help clear up a lot of questions.
So if we didn't have that in there, would we be in a different situation budget-wise right now?
No.
It would be the same.
Be the same. Yes, because the debt service, this Fund 30, these payments that you see here, those are a separate line item, if you will, on our levy. Those are not in the other pooled funds and capped funds that are on our levy. Those are specifically based on the bonds, the outstanding bonds, and the principal and interest that districts have to pay for those on an annual basis. And that's a separate levy to taxpayers than the other items that we levy for. And that's not counted in terms of our deficit, because you'll see that those payments are going to be very close in terms of where they're at, what you're bringing in and what you're paying out for those. But those are not what are classified as operating funds. The operating funds are the direct funds that districts control, and the three are this Fund 10, which is the education fund, Fund 20, which is the O&M, and then Fund 40, which is the transportation. Those are what are classified as the operating funds. So, committee okay with recommending this budget to the full board?
I am good.
Okay.
No, I see work being done on it, but I'm just not in favor of a deficit budget, and that's where I'm at.
Well, then we're never going to have a budget to present to the board then.
Can I talk to Tom?
I'm just letting you know the reality of it.
Please, can I tell Tom why?
Go ahead, Larry.
Thank you. I asked you several times, and we've had conversations about putting a plan together, and I know deficits don't go away overnight because they're not made overnight, okay? I understand that and I get that. I know you work hard on this, but I know I've asked several times many times, can't we just have something drawn up to give us, so we could foresee, in the future, the deficit going away, a plan, okay? Call it deficit reduction, call it whatever you want, getting out of debt. And I just never have seen anything, and I asked Stearns about it, and she says, well, everybody agreed that we would just leave it the way it is. No, not everybody agreed in that committee of the whole meeting. Do you remember when you presented on the deficit and all that? And we all sat in there for 4 hours, and everybody looked at each other at the end of the thing. So she took that as everybody was okay with leaving it where it was, and that's what she told me. So I'm not okay with leaving it where it is. Could I be okay with it now? Yeah. Would I feel much better with a plan in place that we actually follow each year? I'd feel much better with that. And I know I've told you this before, so
Sure.
we've talked. So that's just where I'm at with it,
Yeah, but the board hasn't directed him to create a deficit reduction plan, or that we were going to go and abide by some sort of deficit reduction plan, especially when we're not being told that we have to do that. And I don't know what more of a deficit reduction plan you need when he's showing you the numbers right here. Obviously, we've been reducing the deficit.
What are you going to twist my arm over a deficit?
Obviously, I don't play your game, Harry. That's your game, not mine.
I work for the community.
So do I.
No.
But he's showing you right here where for the past 4 years there's been whether you want to call it a deficit reduction plan or not, he's brought it down from 6.6 to 3.4. And I don't know how this is not satisfying your definition of a deficit reduction plan.
Because it doesn't satisfy me. I want to work in the black.
You want him to put something on paper so you can call them out when it doesn't, when they don't.
No.
You can't put something like that.
Okay, it's your opinion. Thank you. You're entitled.
Yeah, and so are you. And so, but either way, you can't sit here and say that there isn't, that we're not reducing our deficit or there is no plan when he's showing you in black and white, like you like,
Where's
right
the
there.
plan?
These are the plans, Larry. That's what we're going through right here.
It's not what I'm talking. It's not the kind of plan
That
I'm talking about.
a budget, a summary. That's not a plan. This is a plan, Larry. Whether you want to recognize it or not. I know you didn't get a finance degree, but this is a plan for those that did not get a finance degree.
I'm sorry I didn't get one where you got yours. Okay.
Yeah,
So
I did.
All right.
I did, and I also got it in my master's too. So if you don't know, this is the plan.
No, it's not the plan.
Yes, it
It's
is.
not the plan I'm talking
Kim,
about.
are you
And
okay?
Tom understands where I'm coming from with
She's
this.
just gonna echo Larry.
Tom, can you send me your presentation that you showed us tonight, and can I get back to you tomorrow?
Sure.
I just want to go over it, and if I want to just jot down a few more questions and talk with you
Well,
tomorrow.
Sure.
wait a minute. Board member Christine says you're just going to echo me, right? I mean,
Well, that's what you want her to
what she
do.
said.
That's what you want her to do.
I can make my own decisions, Christine. Could you send that to
Yeah,
me?
sure.
And then
Not a problem.
I want to just review all of this, and then I'll get in touch with you
Okay.
tomorrow.
No problem.
and from day one, I came aboard in 13, and I was
Oh,
pressing
this is
for
all
reduction.
you. This is so you,
Okay?
Larry.
No.
You did all this work. I keep forgetting. Thank God you're
Absolutely.
here, Larry, because if you weren't here, this poor district would have just not survived without you. I keep forgetting you're a one-man board.
Man, oh man, you're something else.
Oh, you are. To sit here and actually try and claim that since 2013 this is
Just
your doing?
please be
Yeah, exactly. You be quiet, Larry. You're such a joke, and everybody knows
All right,
it.
we're gonna move on.
Everybody.
We're gonna move on.
You're a turncoat.
So this is the resolution that we'll present to the board to adopt, and again, it just outlines the $4.5 million transfer. $3.5 million is going to the ed fund, and $1 million is going to that municipal retirement fund to offset the $500,000 negative balance that we had from 2016. We've approved this annually, so there's nothing really new there. The fall paper bid came in, again, Midland Paper at $21,310 was the low bid out of the 4 bids that were submitted. I'm recommending to the committee that we accept the low bid from Midland. Anybody have any objections to that? And then the last piece is the winter athletic bid. Again, we've seen these before. We review all the bids, we cherry pick the low bids, total them up, and then we're recommending the following companies as the low bidders for the items that were selected, totaling $31,547. Is the committee okay with that?
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay. That is all I have for this evening, unless anybody else has anything else.
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
8:16.
8:16. Call it close. I'll send that to you tonight so you
Thank
have
you.
it.
Yes,
Yeah,
I'd like to
absolutely.
look at it.
Sure.
I don't appreciate you putting words in my mouth.
I don't have to. It's on video.
Kim, do you want the this PowerPoint presentation, right?
What you just presented to us,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. This
Yes.
one. You got it.
And it's the same thing you're gonna go over when you present the budget, correct?
Yes. Yes. I may add a couple slides just with a little more detail, but essentially yes. These slides will not change. I may add a couple smaller slides with just some more components of it, some of the highlights of it, what we spent technology-wise and those kinds of things like I've done in the past. And I'll change this. I apologize for this, but I'll change this out and so that we're showing the revenues and not the expenditures. My fault on that?
No problem.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone.